When it comes to maintaining the enemy's system, he often feigns that his system has sustained civilization for so long, because it is his intellectually superior mind that built it, and that all others, specifically black people, are too intellectually inferior to construct a sustainable society. And when it comes to correcting all of the oppressive dynamics of the system, he also claims that it is simply too complex to fix in a reasonable amount of time, if at all. This is what is called superficial complexity. The enemy constructs his system to produce the illusion of overwhelming data through the multiplication of its matrices, layer upon layer of institutions, laws, cultural norms, and technical mechanisms that appear to require specialized expertise to navigate. As we will illustrate, however, it is only basic step-by-step arithmetic and common sense that is needed to navigate the system and decode its hidden mechanisms. The enemy deliberately multiplies the surface detail in order to exhaust and overwhelm our analytical mind before it can reach the simple base logic underneath. But the base logic is simple. 7 principles, 7 foundational operating laws, and every derivative complexity in the system is traceable back to one or more of those 7 foundations. You do not need to understand every nuance of every institution. You need to understand the operating system. You need to decode the binary, and then you need to identify the base cause of the output you are trying to correct. Then you apply the corresponding correction at the root level, and the fractal correction propagates outward through every derivative. In occult and metaphysical law, there is a principle that aligns with what many traditions call karma, which is the law of causality in its moral dimension. Every action generates a corresponding consequence. Every cause produces an effect, and the enemy's deception, operating through concealment and lies, accumulates a causal debt that eventually returns to the source. This is why the enemy must code all of his warfare systems into a language that is partially true, yet ultimately false. He must provide a transparent blueprint manual to his systems, yet obscure how that blueprint is perceived by his captive subjects. When it comes to maintaining the system, the sophisticated operator understands this. Thus, instead of lying outright, the enemy tells the truth in a form that the subject cannot decode. He puts the plan in a film. He hides the doctrine in plain sight. He publishes the manual and classifies it for 30 years. He encodes the message in symbolism that only initiates can read. He funds the art that depicts exactly what he is doing, but wraps it in fiction so it registers as entertainment rather than confession. This technique serves 2 purposes simultaneously. First, it provides a form of karmic or legal cover. The information was technically available and the disclosure was technically made. Second, it ensures the target population absorbs the programming contained in the indirect truth without ever consciously processing it as a threat. Horror films which depict MK Ultra mind control as demonic possession is the clearest example. The truth is being shown. The mechanism is on the screen, but the supernatural framing ensures that it is processed as fiction. The causal debt of the act is partially discharged through the disclosure, and the target is programmed rather than warned. Understanding this principle means you watch everything differently. You read fiction as confession. You watch entertainment as indirect documentation. You treat symbolism as a technical language rather than decoration, because the enemy has been telling you exactly what he is doing in the language of symbol, metaphor, and indirect disclosure. And the only reason it has not been received as a warning is because the decoding key has never been taught. Therefore, in order to understand how to dismantle the system, we must first understand exactly how the enemy codifies the firewall of the system, which utilizes his secret language. Every system, whether it is a computer, a legal structure, a media narrative, or a social institution, runs on binary logic at its foundation: true or false, legal or illegal, credible or incredible, included or excluded. The system's power depends entirely on controlling which inputs get coded as true and which get coded as false. Whoever writes the binary code of a system controls every output that system will ever produce. This is why language is the primary battlefield, because the binary code of a human system is built in language. Definitions, laws, narratives, classifications, what is called civilized and what is called savage, what is called science and what is called superstition, what is called history and what is called myth. Every one of these is a binary assignment, true or false, that determines how reality is processed by anyone running the system's code. First, the enemy writes the code. Then he installs it into the target population through education, media, religion, and culture, which are all forms of hypnotic induction operating through frequency and repetition. Once installed, the target population processes reality through the enemy's eyes and through his binary system that produces outputs: beliefs, behaviors, political choices, and self-perception that serve the enemy's architecture. Every word is a vibration. When you speak, you are generating a sound wave, which is a physical frequency that travels through air and enters the body of the listener through the ear canal. But it doesn't stop at intellectual comprehension. Sound waves interact with the nervous system directly. Specific frequencies produce measurable physiological responses, such as changes in heart rate, brainwave activity, cortisol levels, and emotional state. This is not metaphor. This is documented acoustics and neuroscience. The brain operates in distinct frequency states. Beta is the alert, analytical, waking state. Alpha is relaxed, creative, and receptive. Theta is the hypnagogic state. It's the border between waking and sleep, and it is here that the subconscious mind becomes fully accessible. Then we have delta, which is deep sleep. The critical point is this: the conscious, analytical mind, the filter that evaluates incoming information and decides what to accept or reject, is primarily active in beta. When frequency drops to alpha and theta, that filter weakens significantly. Hypnotic induction is the deliberate use of vocal frequency, rhythm, and language pattern to guide the listener's brainwave state from beta down into alpha and theta, at which point suggestions can bypass the critical filter and write directly onto the subconscious. The hypnotist does not fight the conscious mind. He simply lowers the frequency until the door opens. The specific techniques are precise. A slow, monotone, rhythmically consistent vocal cadence mimics the brain's own relaxation patterns and pulls the listener into synchronization. This is called entrainment. Repetition of specific phrases creates a rhythmic loop that numbs analytical resistance. Embedded commands, which are directives hidden inside the grammatical structure of seemingly neutral sentences, are processed by the subconscious without the conscious mind flagging them as commands. Presupposition, which is stating something as already true rather than proposing it, bypasses the evaluation stage entirely because the mind never gets the chance to question it. Now connect this to the Hermetic laws. The law of vibration is the mechanism, and frequency is the carrier wave. The law of mentalism is the target, and the operating system of the mind is what is being accessed. The law of rhythm is the method, and entrainment works by synchronizing the listener's cycles to the speaker's. And the law of causality is the outcome, which is what is installed at the subconscious level, will produce corresponding behavior, belief, and perception in the physical world. Therefore, language is not just communication. It is code being written into a living operating system. It is a technology. So, how do you dismantle it? The answer is the same way you dismantle any code. You find the base logic and you flip it. You audit every binary assignment you have been given, every true-false you are running. And you ask, who is it that wrote this code? Who benefits from this being assigned as true? Who benefits from that being assigned as false? When you trace the binary assignments back to their source, the architecture of the system becomes visible. And a system whose architecture is visible can be navigated, countered, and dismantled. When you understand what the enemy wants, what he fears, and what he is trying to protect, then his every action, no matter how coded or indirect, becomes readable. This is because behavior is always the output of motive, and every communication is shaped by the agenda behind it. The enemy's secret language is not random symbolism. It is a consistent expression of consistent psychology, which means once you have mapped the psychology, you have the key to every symbol, every narrative choice, every deliberate omission, and every carefully constructed framing decision he makes. If you know that his primary motive is survival, concealment of what he has taken, and suppression of who it was taken from, then you understand why his history books are written the way they are, why his science excludes certain data, why his entertainment frames certain groups in certain ways, and why his language assigns certain words certain meanings. All of it is the same motive expressing itself through different channels. Understanding his fear is equally important because what a system works hardest to ridicule, suppress, or make unspeakable is always the thing that most threatens it. The intensity of the suppression is itself a signal pointing directly at the truth being suppressed, which means the map of what he attacks most aggressively is also the map of what he cannot afford for you to understand. His indirect disclosures, the truths encoded in fiction, in symbolism, and in the fine print of his own documents, all follow a predictable psychological pattern because he discloses in the way a guilty mind always discloses, with just enough distance from the confession to maintain deniability, which once you know to look for it, makes the confession easier to find than a direct statement would have been. Ultimately, secret language is only secret to someone who does not know the speaker. And the moment you have studied the enemy's psychology deeply enough to predict his behavior, his coded language stops being a cipher and becomes transparent. Because you are no longer trying to decode isolated symbols, you are reading the continuous and consistent expression of a mind whose motives, fears, and methods you already know. Now, let's take a look at the base structure of his systems, which is the Hermetic 7-base composition of all systems. All things in reality are interconnected networks, whether it be the network code language, the network of the mind and brain, the network of consciousness, or the network of reality. The law of mentalism states that all is mind, that the universe itself is a mental construct, that consciousness is the substrate from which all material reality emerges. In computing, this is the operating system. The OS is the invisible mental layer that governs every function of the machine. Nothing runs without it. There is nothing that exists in the computer's world that was not first conceived in the operating system, just as nothing manifests in physical reality that was not first a thought in the mind of consciousness. The law of correspondence, as above, so below, means that the same patterns repeat at every scale. A cell mirrors a solar system, an atom mirrors a galaxy. In computing, this is the fractal and compounding architecture. It's the recursive, self-similar structures of code that repeat their logic at every level of the system. A function calls itself. A pattern replicates across scales. The micro reflects the macro. As above, so below. When it comes to the law of vibration, it states that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates, and the difference between manifestations of matter, energy, and mind is simply the rate of vibration. In computing, this is motional charge. It is the electrical frequency that pulses through the system, the clock speed of the processor, the oscillating charge that carries information. Everything in a computer is vibration at a specific frequency. The law of duality and polarity, meaning everything has two poles, everything has its pair of opposites, is thus the binary code of the system: 1 and 0, true and false, on and off, positive and negative. The entire computational universe is built on two states, just as the entire phenomenal universe, according to the Hermetic principle, is built on the interplay between opposing poles. The law of rhythm states that everything flows in cycles. Tides rise and fall, pendulums swing, seasons turn. In computing, this is the cyclic pattern architecture. It's the clock cycle, the processing loop, the repeating rhythm of the machine's heartbeat that governs when instructions execute. The law of causality, meaning every cause has an effect and every effect has a cause, is the output of the computer. Input produces output. Action produces result. No effect without a prior cause. The computer is a perfect mechanical demonstration of this law. It does exactly what it is told, and the output is always the direct consequence of what was put in. The law of gender, which states that masculine and feminine principles exist in everything and must be balanced for creation to occur, is the correction and balancing mechanism of the computer. Every system requires complementary forces in equilibrium. Error correction, system balance, the interplay between read and write, input and output, process and memory. All of it reflects the generative balance between opposing principles that makes creation possible. The computer did not invent these principles. It inherited them. It is a material imitation of laws that govern consciousness itself. Thus, if the primary principle in correcting or destroying any system is to first decode the foundational framework of that system, then this means that the very first Hermetic principle of mentalism, which is the foundation of all systems, is the starting piece from which to commence the domino effect of systemic causality and logical deduction, so that we may illuminate the hidden mechanisms which effectuate the illusion of so-called idiopathic phenomena. In the context of decoding the system of silent warfare and human targeting, we can thus deduce the following. 1. Mental grounding. All things and all warfare systems in reality are manifested from a mind. Psychoanalysis equals systems analysis. 2. Holistic thinking. All things are connected, all is one. The enemy's mind is the system, and the system is the enemy's mind. The mechanisms of the outer system is a direct reflection of the mind's inner mechanisms. You cannot correct one without the other. As above, so below. As within, so without. Environmental equals environmental. 3. Binary decoding. The system of silent warfare operates on the binary code of mental confusion, true mental data versus false mental data. Confusion equals confusion. The term con means to do something deceptively. Fusion means to mix two or more things together. Confusion, therefore, is caused by the deceptive arrangement of binary data. 4. Motion detection. The mechanisms of the system are kept in motion via the conscious and unconscious decisions of the mind, which created the system, as well as the mind which is subjected to the system. The brain is always mining, or in motion, for information to process so that it can compute its next decision. Mind equals mine. 5. Pattern recognition. The patterns and covert maneuvers of the enemy directly coordinate with the patterns of his mental brain circuits. Brain circuits are specified and quantified arrangements of mental obstacles, which when placed incorrectly, produces mental chaos or circuses. If you mix or arrange the atoms of chemical elements the right way, then you will get harmony and usefulness. Mix them the wrong way, then you will get destruction. Pattern circuit equals pattern circus. Number 6. Base logic. There is no such thing as idiopathic. All things which affect the mind and body are caused by mechanisms placed within the external environment. All problems in the external environment are directly caused by viruses or false data assimilation in the internal mind environment. Environmental equals envirusmental, which equals virus in the mental. 7. Data correction. In order to correct, reconcile, or replace the system of silent warfare, there must first be a reconciliation of the mind. All false mental data must be replaced with true mental data. Unlearn and relearn the warfare system in order to destroy and replace it. First, there is order, then there is chaos, then there is balance. Reconciliation equals reconciliation. Let us now take a closer look at the law of interconnectedness. The law of correspondence tells us something essential about how systems are structured and how they scale. In computing, this is the fractal and compounding architecture. A fractal is a pattern that repeats at every scale. Zoom in and you see the same structure you see when you zoom out. The same logic that governs a single line of code governs the entire program. The same pattern that appears at the micro level replicates at the macro level. This is correspondence in mathematical form. In the context of warfare systems, this principle means that what is happening at the societal level is a direct reflection of what is happening at the individual cognitive level. The mechanisms and assault tactics of the outer system are a direct reflection of what the enemy places into his subject's inner mechanisms. The institutions that produce mind-splitting tactics such as confusion, division, and psychological fragmentation at the societal level have been artificially installed into the individual minds at the micro level. Now, let's connect this to MK-Ultra. The documented induction process used drugs to chemically lower the subject's brainwave state. This achieves through chemistry what a hypnotist achieves through vocal technique. Electroshocks shattered the baseline cognitive architecture entirely, creating a blank, highly suggestible state. Prolonged sleep deprivation kept the mind perpetually on the theta border, unable to return to the critical beta state, and placed into that compromised, frequency-lowered mind were suggestive sounds and commands to be delivered, thus installing programming directly into a subconscious that had no conscious defense left. Hard MK Ultra is fast, forced, violent frequency manipulation. Soft MK Ultra, which is what media, advertising, education, and entertainment perform daily, is slow, sustained, cumulative frequency manipulation. The mechanism is identical. The difference is only the time scale and the intensity. Both are using vibration and frequency to bypass the critical mind and install operating instructions into the subconscious. This is simply witchcraft by another name. And this is why common sense decodes the word environmental as environmental. The environment is the enemy's mental that is made external. The suburb, the school, the media landscape, the legal system. These are not neutral structures. They are the externalized architecture of the enemy's internalized survival instinct mind, and they are continuously reshaping the black minds that inhabit them. The macro system and the micro mind are in constant correspondence, and the compounding aspect is equally important. In conclusion, just as in a computer where a single recursive function can replicate its pattern across an entire dataset, likewise, the enemy's warfare tactics, as well as a single installed belief, can compound and replicate across every domain of the individual's life. One false data point, one core lie installed early and deep, produces correspondingly false outputs, whether in relationships, in self-perception, in political behavior, in spiritual understanding. The corruption always compounds fractally. This means that the correction must also be applied fractally and at the root, so that the correction propagates outward at every scale, and the enemy's micromotions can finally be dismantled.